You have one of the main guys over at AIG over in London last week said the United States government needs to start investing. They need to buy stocks. They need to buy assets. It's the only thing they can do, and it has to be New Deal size. Otherwise, we're going into another Great Depression. That's from him. You have these banks starting to come in and say, we need to have the government take these bad loans that we wrote.
Right.
This is New Deal era gigantic government right around the corner.
No, I think that's right. And I think it highlights one of the most important points that I try to make in the book, especially in the chapter on economics, which is part of, sort of tied to the myth of conservatives being fascist, is this myth that corporations are inherently right-wing. There's this idea that corporations are right-wing, comes out of this idea that it basically comes out of Marxism. Corporations are useless on the culture war, right? They have no use for the right. They're in favor of affirmative action, all this kinds of stuff. They like big regulations because they keep out competition. And so you have these corporations who are constantly trying to get the government to bail them out, to give them favorable legislation, to give them subsidies for this, trade benefits for that, to hurt their competitors, to keep certain technologies from coming up that might hurt their products. Therefore, free markets, when free markets are to their advantage. When free markets aren't to their advantage, they're against free markets. And that was the story of the New Deal. That was the story of the Progressive Era, where big corporations and government worked hand in hand. And we're seeing it again today, where these big corporations are delighted to have government bail them out. And you see the progressive, liberal Democrats saying that they would love to do it. And it's a sign of where the real nexus is between big corporations and regulators wanting to work in tandem and hand in hand. And that's not free market, and that's not right-wing if you define right-wing as free market capitalism, belief in the idea that business should be on its own and sink or swim on its own.
You have Chris Dodd coming out, and this, I saw an article in the Wall Street Journal a couple of weeks ago. They said this kind of thinking would have been unheard of just a couple of months ago. Just to kind of give you a feel of the pace that this is coming at us, it would have been unheard of. Chris Dodd is actually proposing a resurrection of the Homeowners Preservation Corporation, which is which was started in 1933. Yeah. It was a New Deal program. Basically, will not allow you to fail in your mortgage.
Right.
How do you survive in that kind of situation? How does somebody look at, if I had a caller ask me this, they said, Glenn, I don't agree with the big government, I don't agree, but this program is important.
Right.
How do you separate on what's important or makes you feel good and feels like the right thing and fascism?
Well, that's sort of a big point. I mean, that's part of the smiley face of the cover of the book, is that often the things that we want are fascistic. I mean, we like fascistic economics. We like the idea of corporations and businesses, corporations and government working together to help the little guy. We want to, we're willing to take any, corporate subsidy, farm subsidy, whatever it is, if it helps me. And that creates a constituency. And this comes out of FDR, who, radically transformed, revolutionized American politics by turning citizens into clients of the government. They got checks. They became dependent on government in one way or the other. And that was the New Deal coalition.
We were never like this. We were never like this until Wilson and FDR. This is a totally new concept, and it really stemmed from seeing the great success in Italy. I've read things about the scholars that went over and looked at Stalin and said, look at what he's doing. Look what he's doing for industry. Look what he's doing for people. This is the future. Okay, he's killed 1 million people at the time, but he had to do it.
Got to put some eggs to make an omelet.
Yeah.
No, Woodrow Wilson says it quite plainly. He says the essence of progressivism requires that the individual marry his interests to the state. Those his words. It's the idea that the individual has to define himself in relationship to the state, that he gets his livelihood, his meaning. FDR comes out with what he calls the Second Bill of Rights in 1944. Addresses the nation and says basically what he wants to do is basically overturn the Bill of Rights. Remember, the Bill of Rights is negative rights. It says the government has no right to take your gun away, has no right to go into your home, has no right to abridge your speech. He wants to create the Second Bill of Rights, which are all positive rights. You have a right to a home. You have a right to a job. It's things government can give you and that you can demand from government. And if government isn't giving you these things, if it isn't giving you these trinkets, then the government has violated your rights. It is a radical redefinition of our Constitution and our understanding of what makes a citizen in this country.
Isn't what is going on with our enemies in China and Russia, isn't that the future of America in many ways? It's just a happier face. You've got this gigantic, crushing, oppressive government. In Russia, look, I'm just taking the mob away. The Russian mob, it's horrible. I'm just being a strong man because I have to be a strong man. And they couple with these giant corporations. There's no way to destroy that. Because you've got, democracy is too slow. You can't rally the troops and say, hey, we've got to go to war, we've got to get these people, we've got to do all this, because you've got to convince people.
Right.
And then you couple that, so you've got the totalitarian dictator who says, let's go, we're going right now because it's right for the country. And you couple it with the engine of capitalism, the engine of these giant corporations, you can buy as many bullets as you want. Isn't what we're seeing the seeds of here already in China and Russia?
In a lot of ways, yes. I mean, China and Russia fit the classic fascist model a lot better than the United States, by orders of magnitude.
But we have
those are authoritarian regimes, all that kind of stuff.
Right.
I agree with that. But in the United States, I mean, you have some of the things. GE with its, I remember Green Week.
Yeah.
Where they basically say, GE is looking to get all sorts of contracts with the government for alternative energy, for solar energy, all these kinds of things. And so it agrees to put on, like 100 hours of green-friendly, essentially propaganda, incorporating it into its sitcoms, into its dramas, into its news, into its sports, and all because this is essentially what the government wants it to do, and so it can win a closer relationship with the government. It is propagandizing for a popular, again, that's popular, issue like global warming, so that it can curry favor with the government. It's very much the fascist bargain.
We talked about it during Green Week almost every night. I think we were the only show on television that was talking about it. This would have been decried from the highest mountaintops if I would have done it for some cause that I cared about, or if the Fox network, and I don't mean Fox Channel, I mean the Fox network decided to take on some conservative thing, and waterboarding. It's waterboarding week.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
And it's the same kind of thing. There are people who believe in it, people who don't believe in it, and yet nobody said a word, and they never had to disclose that NBC is a wholly owned subsidiary of GE. The largest lobbying group has billions of dollars to make on green energy.
That's right, and it's good corporate promotion for the company. And the company seems progressive and popular and all these kinds of things. But I agree with you entirely. We only recognize as fascist those things we don't like. And so, if I agree, if Fox had come out with it says we're going to incorporate pro-life images or pro-life themes into our programming for a week.
Imagine that.
People would go batty about it, and they would say it's propaganda, it's government, it's corporate collusion with politics and government and all this kind of stuff, and they would decry it as fascist, and they'd have a point. But it's the same point that we have about things like Green Week.
So how do you stop it? How do you wake people up? I've been saying, I mean, a couple of weeks ago, Jonah, I said, please stop buying my book. Buy this book and give it to your liberal friend. One that is open-minded enough that says, okay, I may agree on these policies, yada, 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 but it's important that I learn the history of liberal fascism so I can then judge for myself. I know, oh, this is what I'm doing. If you know what you're doing, well, then you're making an intelligent choice. How do you stop this?
Well, I think one of the things that is decidedly fascistic, or at least just a bad idea, is looking for silver bullets. You know, when Barack Obama campaigns, he's basically saying, I'm a silver bullet, I'm going to solve all your problems just by electing me. FDR, Hitler, all these guys, they basically said all your problems can be solved and all that kind of thing. I don't think conservatives should buy into that logic. The logic of conservatism says that there are no final, there are no perfect solutions to anything. It's just going to take a long argument. I mean, this argument has been going on in America for a century now. During the Cold War, this was an intense argument. You had liberals constantly looking to places like the Soviet Union as a model, saying that it was a better place. You still have these incredibly sand-poundingly stupid people talking about how Castro is a better model, and
I wonder who that is.
All you have to do is you have to just keep having the argument. You have to keep focused. It's a door-to-door fight.
Right.
And saying, it's first principles, and even if freedom makes things harder, it's better to have it harder than to not have it free.
Thanks, Jonah.